Ah, shit. So these Schlieffenplan hexes, and I noted this, I think, when I was looking through the rules, but there's just so many special cases. And the British restriction from entering them is somewhere completely different, if I recall correctly. So the German restriction is built into the movement rules, and they can't enter them unless there's allied units in them. Which makes sense. You ignore anything but a threat, right? And however, the British ones are covered over here in the British Expeditionary Corps area, which gives them a penalty if they move British troops into them. You know, but when you decide to throw the rules into a blender and see what comes out, yeah, I think it's not unreasonable that people are not going to get them all. You know, I mean, I love Europa Universalis. Its rules are not necessarily, although I say there's more cohesion than there is to these or many of the other games I've read recently. But it's got places where things are just in random places. And you know what? I'm sure I make errors and lose those pieces every now and then, those pieces of the rules. You know, you want to write a rule book and you want people to follow it. That's one side of things, and that's what you need if you want a Twilight Struggle, if you want, you know, if you want a game that's going to catch on, the rules have to sink in fairly quickly to everyone. Now, you make one with lots of special cases and then you don't put them kind of in an understandable location. Yeah, I think I see why this didn't get the kind of popularity it maybe would have deserved with a better constructed rule book, because I don't think the rules are that terrible. But yeah, you're going to miss key rules several times just because they're not coherently put together. Anyway, I'll keep playing as I am. I just noticed here, start unrestricted entry of Schlieffenplan hexes, so, you know, what the hell. But by not following the Schlieffenplan, by pushing out here, and I certainly entered hexes along here, this is the rail route, right? You can't go without Ghent. But it's a modified Schlieffenplan, one that says the rails are important. All right. Well, Germans have the initiative. I spent points, both sides, recovered units. This should be here, actually. Both sides recovered units out of their caps. But the hard thing for me, the Germans, I'm almost thinking of spending the 2. I haven't done that, though. So I'd have to look up rules, and I hate looking up rules. This game forces me to keep looking them up again and again and again. As to where they show up, you know, whether. So if I spend 2, because I know somewhere it comes back depleted, but I think that's after a certain time. And it looks like here they come in fine. It might be worth an extra point. The reason I'm looking at spending an extra cap to bring a unit in is I'm looking at the board and I'm really unhappy with where the Germans are right now. Not so much in terms of, you know, the land they're in, but in terms of what my prospects of moving forward are. Yes, I've got an open route here. But that I don't have the troops to kind of push through. I've got very limited forces everywhere, and there's possibility of, you know, a French counterattack slamming through and possibly gaining some ground up there. Not much, not with Abbeville here and its defenses. Back here, I've already got that counterattack in place. Now, granted, I have an opening here, but what the hell am I going to do? Attack Verdun with my big artillery? try to stretch the line out even thinner and thinner. All my troops are back here, as are all the French troops, at least all the large concentrations, and slamming them into the large concentrations of French doesn't seem a terribly valuable task either. What I'd like to do is be able to slip around or something, but I don't see any potential for that. And I am a little worried. So in a place like this, I'm outnumbered. This is fairly well supplied by these units. If I could cut behind, if I could hit Reims, I still don't cut its supply. What can this really do? Not much except bag my units. If I could get with the Allies this in St. Quentin, then a nice little force gets isolated. And that's kind of my worry here, is that this little dance that's going on isn't allowing me to move forward. And that maybe with an extra unit, spending a cap, I'm already spending one, but spending a second cap to throw a unit somewhere, maybe I could get a break here. That's not very strong. Of course, that opens up an important rail line. I put my headquarters here. These guys aren't really in danger of anything else. I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to throw that German unit down here. And I'm going to try to launch an attack straight for Paris through there. That was a success, and then we continued on attacking in this hex to try to get it sort of a broad-based breakthrough. Now for the Allies, there's kind of a tough call. You know, do you fall back from Amiens and give that up for nothing? Or do I try maybe to see if I can push my luck with an attack here? I'm not sure. I'm going to flip this to the Allied turn, give it some time to think. The Allies launched their mandatory attack. They got that out of the way and attacked here. They didn't clear the hex. And it's kind of a pity from them, from their point of view, that they didn't, because had they could have dispatched the headquarters here and some troops to cut this rail line. And then we would have had these guys kind of out of supply. Of course, they could fall back and try to punch their way back through. That's just the way this game works. It's fairly easy, if you do get cut off, to take some rectifying actions. But then the line would have been back here, and that would have been tighter and no opening that the Germans kind of have to creep through. That opening, how valuable is it? How dangerous? I don't know. It's really tough to tell in this game, because if I make a move in this direction, I've weakened this even more, and it's more likely to collapse. However, I'll say one thing. I have supply here. So if this was a weakly held hex, and it's not terribly weak compared to what it's facing, brushing through it would be a valuable action, I think. Putting more and more pressure over here on Soissons and on Paris itself. But this is a strong enough block that I don't feel that that's really applicable. So now the Germans picked up a mandated attack during that battle. And now the kind of tough thing is, well, the Allies are going to pass because they didn't get what they wanted, and they really don't care if the turn ends here. They would rather the turn end than the Germans gain ground. Launching an attack here, which generated another mandatory Allied attack, I'm noticing the route to Paris was left open. That's a serious flaw here. Now, I can't interrupt an activation for the general withdrawal, which means if I can get to Paris, I'm not sure. The hex would fall under control. I don't know if that's sufficient. This is the kind of mistake that this kind of game is unforgiving of, and that I'm very, very capable of making. So when Paris becomes German controlled, that's gonna happen here. However, it's at the end of the game turn, so I have to hold my position in Paris. That does not look possible. And here's the thing. You know, I mean, yes, I could push forward a hex, but I don't have a lot of troops here. Even if I recover them first, I don't have a lot to push forward into there. There's a lot of risk to any move I make. Now, if I recover, I might be able to make it into Compiègne. The only danger is there's two forces that could cut me off pretty easily. And, you know, I mean, lighter stuff, too, kicking around. I would be triggering that mass withdrawal as well. Ugh. The French pulled off their little coup here, cutting off these forces, grabbing this territory here. This is important because the Verdun region was threatened here. The German plan was kind of to march forward here and take, to march forward here, take this hex, which I can't do now because I don't have supply. Now I could launch an attack against the front of the Verdun, but that's highly risky. What I'm going to have to do, I think, is go clobber the French who have cut me off. I got an extra point out of it, though, for activation, so we don't know which way this is, you know, when you take these risky encirclement moves, it's hard to tell who's going to come out on top on them. Germans successfully take Hirschhausen back, and they've actually been generating more and more caps as they go. But here's the problem. They have one more activity. The French are here. It feels like I should be able to trap them, but if I attack here, they can just withdraw out into Rathel, because I didn't leave any troops behind there. They don't have to fight their way out or anything. So they're pretty safe, to tell you the truth. I couldn't move these guys to defend. They're all disorganized. I couldn't do another move with these and spread them out. Plus, the attack on this would be a rather massive one. I also don't really want to unleash these troops, because that opens up something that is really dangerous in a way that Paris isn't. So, what can I do? Oh, this moved. That should be flipped. No running back here and continuously never flipping. Oh boy. I don't want to pass. I have more points. I gotta think. Actually thrown the Allies into a tough place. I did an attack on Soissons, which cleared the space, continuing my push. I had the forces there. It's where I wanted to be attacking in general anyway. But now it's on the French. They have one activation left, and they have a mandated attack. If this may be the time for the withdrawal. If I do the mandated attack, then I am probably not going to be in this hex. Now, I could do a mandated attack against this hex. I could withdraw 1, 2, and send one infantry unit charging in there alone. Grabbing this. That may be the best choice for victory points, and allows me to avoid the withdrawal for another action. The withdrawal may be a good idea, though, so I want to think about that option a little bit further. I'm going to call the withdrawal. Oh, that's going to put the Joffre 2 into play for that next turn. The reason I'm doing is that it cancels my mandatory attack. I'm going to have to call it at some point or another. What's the victory point cost for this? I think it's down 2. Yeah, because it's game turn 4 or later. So I've just... and you could almost count that in. So now the Germans getting double if they get Paris is very likely. And now what I'm going to be doing is going down the line. I'm allowed to move one hex away. Well, I'm allowed to move hex by hex as many units as I like by their movement point allowance. But I can't enter enemy controlled or occupied hexes. So I'm going to lose this hex basically through the withdrawal, but that's okay. I need to clean my line up. It's going to take quite a bit of thought about it because, for example, I may want to make this move here and block that because that's a 1 hex control. You know, things get wider back here, so falling all the way back to the same doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But basically, I'm going to be trying to look at how can I best defend the Allied position as it stands. And that's going to involve stripping some troops out of the Verdun region, out of here. This thing goes away. There's a whole list of effects here, actually. Joffre 2, British and French get to move. Strangely, that's not noted there. Let me... Shit. I'm pretty sure it does get withdrawn, but again, you know, when I say think, I mean I'm going to look through the rules and try to figure out what the hell the effects of doing something are to the large extent. And I remember that rule taking place, but it's not in play right now. Maybe it's Paris in danger, maybe it's somewhere else. So now I'm going to have to look through all the rules, because again, there's no index into that item. Now, granted, most games tend to kind of not do the index well enough that you can find everything that you need, but to not have an index at all, that's kind of obnoxious. It's kind of an interesting thing, rules lookups. Just since my mind's on that. I remember back when I was a younger man, well, I don't know if I've ever been a man. I think I've always been kind of a boy, but it's kind of hard to make that argument when you've got gray beard and you're long in the teeth. We'll get into that at some point. But I used to enjoy, I can remember flipping through SFB's rulebook, looking for that edge on my opponent, just reading the rules. And you know, to tell you the truth, when I'm playing a competitive game that somebody else teaches me for the first time, when I'm playing something that I feel has a lot of these special case rules, I think I do still do this. I want to look through the rules, try to see, hey, is there something he's missing? Not so much there for the edge, but there's almost this competition as in, hey, can I show you that you didn't teach me all the rules? Because there's something that's been bugging me all game. Something like, say, the Schlieffen plan that I screwed up there. And usually, I found that people who teach me the rules are no better than I am in general. Maybe just a little bit better, but they're certainly not infallible. So I take a certain enjoyment in that. What I don't take an enjoyment in, though, I'm finding, is looking these rules up when I'm on camera as much. I think I actually lose some of my wargamer attributes, the things that make me capable of handling games better, just because I do these on camera all the time. So, you know, I mean, I think about the SPI rules, Desert Fox. I struggled with them because that was some different concepts from most SPI games, and some of the stuff was not where you'd expect it. No index there. Generally, SPI doesn't need one. Because of the way the rules are formatted, it's usually pretty easy to find what you need. But there were a couple of things in that slipped my mind and I couldn't find easily. And you know, maybe I'm just harsher when I'm doing these videos on the rules because of this situation. If I'm teaching somebody a game that I don't really know very well, which is usually the case, and we're playing it together, I get that same kind of frustration where, shit, I looked up a rule and I see that we've been playing something wrong all along. And I know it's my fault. You know, that pisses me off. And that's kind of... And of course, I'm going to blame the rules, but because the rules could have met my needs better. And then maybe I wouldn't have the fault. But the natural truth is, it's when I'm not playing it completely solo. And doing these is not completely solo. I feel like I screw things up more. Not to say I don't screw things up if I play all by myself. I certainly can manage that as well. But just some of those random thoughts to try to keep me from having to look up some rules. Because no matter what, I don't actually enjoy doing it. But it's easier for me to complain than to do it when I'm on video, right? And I like complaining, but it actually wasn't as helpful as I had hoped. I did manage to pull out of this kind of exposed position and, tighten the line up there. I couldn't close this up. I couldn't get as much. I've got something drifting out and forces in different places here. But I couldn't really pull out as far as I wanted to and get as much support as I wanted to. This area is much more solid. Over here, I'm not comfortable at all. And the Germans have a decent amount of actions, 3 to my 1. And I've got this mandatory attack, which is going to cost me a oh no, it's canceled. That was one of the bonuses. So I get to keep my cap. You know what? This hex, before I do the withdrawal, I'm going to spend that cap to upgrade that hex. And then there's some units that I'll get to move out of there, which will help stiffen the line in the Paris region, because I'm really not thrilled with what I've got in general here facing the German line. That leaves the Germans to 3 unanswered points, but I feel a lot stronger with some defenses here. Regarding the Alsace thing, yes, I looked it up. It's in the Paris Endangers rule only. It gets removed just then. Kind of a weird situation. It's not a terribly important piece. The big question is bold push for Paris or not. There's a couple of places I could launch the attack against. There's significant defensive capability in both of these because I took that point to upgrade these guys before the withdrawal, or notionally before it, when I saw how screwed I was. Or do I go to try to put a better grip on Paris through here? That's probably unlikely. Or to create something more sustainable. Well, this game is about the Schlieffen plan. The attempt to get to Paris seems to me absolutely vital. It is the way out early as well. Not that I particularly want to stop playing. I am enjoying, even with the rules issues. But the problem is I'm having a real hard time figuring out how to get this grip. This looks like the weakest hex. With just a couple infantry, yes, it has a terrain advantage. This looks like a strong hex to attack from. The Allies have no additional points. Another possible strong hex, no, this doesn't have the reserve resources to do it. So these guys aren't going to get very far. So if I can push into here with most of these units, then maybe I can do a follow-up from this hex, getting into Paris itself, because there won't be anything to defend. That probably won't cause Paris to fall, although, hey, if I besiege it, it's got a chance right away. But I can start moving my artillery into place for it. So I think I'm going to go for it. A bit about the worst possible result the Germans could have gotten. First round, cautious attacker. They didn't get to attack, so I spent another point because that still gives me a point to get to Paris. Well, that gave the Allies a cap off the die roll, and they didn't take the hex, and they're not allowed to retreat. They weren't completely disrupted. Only the defenders got always an option to retreat, and now that kind of opens things up. The Entente can push forward and take Soissons back, perhaps. That may not be the wisest move because this hex could well fall. So I've got to think a little bit. Do I want to push the Germans out of here? Well, that's kind of... I've got one action here. I've got one thing I can do. And if I don't push the Germans out of here, they may well be able to throw an extra couple units in and punch a hole in my defenses. And then they're right at the border of Paris. In actually something that looks very much like what I had in Der Feldkrieg, although I think it did not get this far this early. I don't know. That's always the problem, is this. So one of the things in this game is you can't sit there and completely figure out what the best move is, because there's so much randomness in the fortunes of war. You don't know what's going to happen to such an extent, and it's just outside my ability, at least, to try to calculate that to any really significant effort. So I can kind of play this game on feel, which is always what I like. Of course, if I've got the rules wrong, my feel is wrong, but wow. The Germans have an activation left. If I simply pass, then maybe they can punch this hole. Is it a big deal if they take this? That's another good question. I don't know. But certainly, if I make a move on, say, here, then the Germans have essentially a free move to pull their troops out of here. I can't cut the entire rail net, no matter what, unless I get another cap off the battle. I think I want to pass, simply because anything I do gives the Germans a free activation if I actually do it. And for the same reason that a pass made sense, although this is tricky because this is my supply source. I've got problems if I lose that hex. So I may have erred here. I'm going to put one of these crappers in here. I've still got some defense there, but there's a significant French force that could cut my line. I pushed into Soissons. The event for the attack was routed. Routed means that someone has to retreat no matter what. Whoever has the least standing quality units. Now, the units that weren't involved count towards this. So I've got one in reserve here that's going to help hold the line. These other two attacking, the Brits have to put this in the line, but they don't have to. The Germans don't have to attack it. I get to choose where the Germans attack, actually. And I think the Germans are going to ignore the cav, because it doesn't do them any good. They have to launch against this, though. If they attack the cav, it does do them some good. Because if the cav withdraws, then maybe I can shift somewhere. But that opens something. This thing can go into the reserve and we'll get an extra hit. So ignoring the cav means the cav's just not going to be attacked. And chances are very high that the Germans are going to win this fight. Let's roll it out. I don't know if it's a terribly important one. We got a tech or a TEM or whatever there. And that's going to be a miss. And then for the Brits, they get one hit on the Germans. That means the Germans are going to have 2 units left, so the Brits have to retreat from there. I guess I'll pull them back. Oh, can't go to Paris. Crap. Well, that's a kick in the ass, isn't it? However, I have no caps left. So going to Paris isn't that big a deal. Now, the question is, I can cut this off. I can cut it completely out of supply. And I think that's what I want to do. I want to launch an attack coming from here up to here. And that kind of randomness is stuff that didn't really happen much in the war. You could say, well, that just shows you're an incompetent commander that this is available. Yeah, okay. But it disturbs me when that becomes so easy to do. It's kind of the same feeling that I get out of Hitler's war. Is this constant flow of what looks like maybe what was intended to capture the initial attack and pocketing of armies. It really looks more like a chaos like that is maintained throughout the entire war in Hitler's war, at least on the East Front. And elsewhere too, just weird chaotic bubbles. Here, again, this kind of overextension probably wouldn't happen. But there were wars that were fought by really incompetent people like me, right? Who couldn't read a map and think in advance properly. So, you know, it gives you your chance to slit your wrists. It just kind of bugs me when a game doesn't help you not do that, or when I feel like I'm really likely to misuse my units. That's a little disturbing to me. I'm not sure why. Mainly because I'm more interested in watching the story than learning, and also seeing, you know, what's important though. So, you know, here I'm seeing, geez, I screwed up, didn't I? Well, we'll see. Maybe I don't pay the price for it, but it was definitely a screw up from my point of view at this point. And the Germans held strong, and of course whoever the commander is here historically would be seen as heroic and brilliant for this risky attack, knowing that his force would hold. This is totally against all odds, though. I mean, I've got 2 shots. We actually got the attacker surprised had there been any terrain effect, but there isn't. But that German unit surviving that attack was really, really unlikely. Of course, the cautious attack could have allowed that as well, as could a number of other events, which could have allowed me to extricate the units from there. There's always a risk when you go in. This has kind of weakened the Allied line, but at least I get to recuperate because it's the end of the turn. And our supplies look good across the board. Lots of... I'm never sure which of these are correct and which aren't. They're a very confusing factor in the game. The rules aren't that odd on them. Like, the rules on them aren't that confusing, the blocked hex sides. It's just when you start applying them, it's... crap, what do I got there? You know, what? Why am I defended there? What's going on? Well, what's the defense? The defense is saying that the French can't go this way from that hex. It's probably a useless piece, but it does indicate something, I guess. I don't know. All right, and to finish up, I guess we just reallocate. The units recover from their attacks. This has been a long video for this turn. Well, a couple of actions ago we had the Paris in danger go into play, which means the Alsace command comes away. Finally. And these 2 units come in next turn, according to their... And we're almost at next turn. I've recovered forces. There's still Germans that we're recovering over here. But yeah, so now the southern line for the French has been weakened. And there's this desire to push there, but and victory points to be gotten, right? But there's the, where do you want your offensive? Do you want Paris? Or do you want to give them a chance to really defend it? Well, we'll see what kind of deploys out there, because if the Allies deploy too much in the Paris sector, maybe it serves me better to try to make an advance somewhere else and give up on the grand attack. What happens if I withdraw? Why do I want to withdraw, right? I want to withdraw because I'll get more command points, which are vital to this game. I might want to withdraw because I've got enough terrain that if I defend it all, I think I'll get that 2-to-1 victory. I don't think that's the case right now. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. To me, it looks like 6 hexes that I've captured. Times 2.5, assuming that. Say times 2 is 12. with Paris, I think I've got a pretty, I think I've got a guaranteed victory at this point. I think France will fall if I take Paris. If I don't take Paris, France will not fall. So I'm not ready to withdraw until I take some additional things, maybe. On the other hand, I don't have to build trenches. I could do the withdrawal to get extra points. That reduces my victory point total, though. So this is going to be a tough turn. I'm going to stay on this video because I think the game may be ending next turn. Maybe? I don't know. Paris is definitely in danger. Oh well, we're in the turn beyond the Paris defense and the withdrawal. So we got the Joffre 2 roll, which means the French are getting a more equitable, maybe advantageous cap points. I got a 7. I paid 2 of them and threw some more reinforcements or replacement units into play. Do I have any special here? Replacement units purchased with 1 cap to enter 2 must enter on disrupted side. Ooh. Well, I still think it's worth filtering more units into play. They will recover eventually. And I get a full strength BEF unit as a replacement unit. I assume I get that immediately. I'll just take an infantry. I'm going to throw that down with the BEF division. I've got a pretty strong defense right now. I could even throw troops right here into this Montdidier line to, try to stiffen that location, but I don't consider that terribly important. In fact, one of the things I'm kind of looking at is the possibility of taking Rethel back to shorten my lines. Other than that, well, one thing that I was always worried about, because I couldn't find the unit, well, the Alsace unit has this PDR on it, which indicates to remove it from play when Paris is removed. Since it's specifically called out in the rules, although at other places they say remove the PDR unit or units, I don't know which. I had been worrying about that in the back of my mind and thought maybe it was just a typo there. Anyway, initiative is in the Germans' hands. They have a lot of caps. I don't think they can get Paris. There's a decent amount of troops there. Remember, they got to hold it till the end of the turn. And although I got my artillery in place to try to take it, they don't actually have to take the fortress. That's the weird thing. They just have to hold the city at the end of the turn to trigger the victory point change there. That's, I don't know. I don't know how likely I am to make it there. I've got a big span of additional caps. That might help. Anyway, it's time to kick things off and see what I can possibly gain. I don't have the additional troops. The French, they keep spending caps on replacing troops, so they've got this continuous flow coming in. Well, the Germans went for it anyway. They destroyed the fortress of Paris, but they didn't get any ground on it. It was a skirmish. They did some damage, but not the level that the French really left themselves open with only 3 units there, it turned out. How dangerous is it? Well, it doesn't look like you have to have Paris in supply to get this advantage. You just have to maintain control. So I could give up some of these spaces here on this last-ditch effort at a victory attempt, an automatic victory. The fact that I didn't get Paris is kind of scary. I did push some additional units out of Saint-Quentin forward, but there's a big gap right there. I don't know quite what that means yet. I can cut the German supply off, and then if the Germans are activated again, I think they have to withdraw. So I think the Germans will have to try to reestablish some kind of supply line. But there are a couple of places they could create it. And among the situations, this guy's at kind of risk if there's a move this way. So there's a lot in play right here that I'm not quite sure where we're going to go. Part of the problem is these guys I think I can activate and keep hitting Paris even if I get cut off from supply. I can continue to try to fight that battle. Maybe I don't want to, maybe I do. But if the Allies do manage to cut the line there, that may not save their bacon. They may need to try to drive that Paris attack out first. Given that, I'd love to cut that line and throw reinforcements in here. I've got to be kind of careful. I've only got 2 units now there, and there's a bunch of Germans there. And from what I can tell, they can continue the attack without supply. Allies did 2 actions. One pushed some troops into here, coming out of Reims. Some troops pushed into here to launch an attack. Now, the Germans got the tactical advantage there, spent a cap to cause a skirmish only, so that didn't really push forward. And then they also pushed some additional troops into Paris to try to continue to hold the fight there. Now with this open, I've got the BEF that I could, presumably, if I send some of the forces forward, I could send more troops into Paris as well. So I think we've got kind of this really ugly situation going where the Germans are going to get trapped in Paris. I don't know, though, because there's not a lot of caps here for the Allies. So the Germans have a lot of ability to get their units moving again. In the second activation, which was coming out of Chalon and moving up and shortening the border. So now I've got these guys kind of freed up. They can reinforce there and strengthen the line for whatever that matters. In the long term, that does matter. But if Paris falls, obviously, it's not too big a deal, except that these are victory point hexes here. They decided to push again, and you can see they were successful. They got the routed event, which gave them a real advantage that maybe they wouldn't have had a shot otherwise. So now they've conquered Paris. It's not over yet. I don't flip this counter till the end of the stage. But the game's looking really shaky in terms of the Allies. The Germans took a big gamble on that move. Now what? I've got one more action here in caps. I could, try to clear, say, this hex with its terrain effects thing by using troops back here from Amiens. I could use troops here to try to do so. I can actually get them in there, and this is almost an unimportant hex. So I've got a lot of interesting options available, and I think I do want to take one to try to push further and stabilize my position there as much as possible. The Germans threw more troops into, what is it, Soissons? No, Compiègne. Mew. They threw more troops in there in the outskirts of Paris, but they actually did an attack, and it ended up as a counterattack. It was kind of iffy to make the attack to begin with. Counterattack wasn't a bad result for them, but they probably would have been better off just strengthening the position rather than launching combat in there, which they didn't have to do. But mistakes happen in this game. Now, I look at the German force. It's not terribly strong. The Allies have some things that they could do. They could recover this, and that gives the Germans another chance to move and maybe strengthen their defense of Paris. I could launch this force, which could probably take Paris back. I'll have to use the headquarters to get in there, because there's a diamond there to give me the 3 movement points. I think that's my best chance of avoiding victory, or avoiding a loss of Paris, and probably of the game. But it does open up Chateau Thierry. I might be able to... These guys aren't going to be able to get all the way out there. They're only going to get 2 hexes at most. So there's going to be a gap there unless the Cav alone moves there. Other options, the BEF could move there. It's not giving up an important place, but it's a lot less likely to take the hex. Likewise, with things like this, maybe these guys could throw themselves in. They're a fair-sized force. That doesn't give up anything important. I think that's my best move, is to pull out of there and march down from the north. So that's what I'm going to choose. We come out of here, 1, 2, 3. That's going to flip this, and for whatever it's worth, this doesn't matter anymore, but we move it there. Well, these battles for Paris are pretty important. Let's see what the fortunes of war is this time. A 3, cautious attacker cancels the battle. We didn't get in there. Or we get in, but we don't get to attack. That's painful. I believe that also surrenders initiative. So now the Germans have the initiative. Now, the Germans are in an interesting position. They've got everything they want. They could pass. Now, of course, if they do, the French can trigger this again. So I need to think a little bit. Do I need more Germans to come in? Some of these are still in place. That's still in place, okay. Because throwing more forces into Paris seems incredibly valuable. I can not do it through here, I think, because this is occupied by the enemy. I'd have to stop there. I'm not sure there's much I can get in except this stack, which I can't really afford. You know, I reinforced there for a reason. So that becomes kind of a problematic situation. I've got this huge force in Amiens that I could start crunching down towards Paris. There's no longer any real well, there's this. Shit. I don't know, I gotta think. Half-assed decisions one way or another. For the Germans, one of my decisions was, okay, well, if I can't hold Paris, if I can't push more stuff in there, let's get something out of this. So I made my attack into the Verdun region. And you can see that didn't really work too well. But I did get a cap off that, and I said, you know, the hell with it. I really want this hex. And then I pushed into this hex, and I didn't gain control. That was a skirmish, actually. I didn't gain control of the hex. If I had gained control of the hex on the first move, then I could have shifted troops from Amiens and helped defend Paris. Right now, the French, the Allies, have a few choices. One of their choices is to launch another attack with the stack they have here of 3 units. Another option would be to try to bring another stack of units into play. But right now, that other stack wouldn't join the attack here. And the Germans are looking kind of weak in Paris. I think I've got a shot at taking them. They're going to put their disrupted units in the line, though, so that I don't get to gain any reserves. But I think that's all the Allies really can do at this point, is try to retake the Paris. I was listening to my earlier statements. I should be rolling these out. Anyway, the French failed completely, although they did cause one more step loss, and the Allies still have a cap. Now, the problem is, if they succeed with their attack on Paris, and they have to make one more attack or else they take another penalty, if they pass at this point, for example, the Germans can just pass and say we own Paris. So they're going to have to launch an attack. If they succeed with this attack, the Germans still have 3 cap available to try to retake Paris here, and perhaps get some additional victory points before the end of the turn check. And in particular, where do we have the strength to do it? The Brits are good only on defense. That's what the red circle says. They're better units on defense. These are small units, though, realize. The French are going to be a little bit stronger coming in, so I probably want to throw those units in. I don't have enough points to recover units and try to attack again. This would be a potential. I guess, no, I don't think I can move there because I'd be moving from an enemy-controlled and occupied, enemy-controlled contested, to an enemy-controlled occupied, uncontested, and that says no, I can't just shift more troops into this hex. So I feel like this is my best unit, and I got to take a shot at this. This could be the game here, so let's follow it out. 1, 2, 3. The headquarters comes pouring in. We get to roll the event, and we get a 7. I could reduce this to a skirmish. That probably improves my chances the best. Given the number of forces that the Allies could bring in. And that, you know, the point is, if I lose the hex, I can try for it some more. I still have a couple of caps. That's the one disadvantage to doing the skirmish. And it doesn't really matter what I do. I've got to spread my troops out and hit everything. And then the Germans will go after the best unit. But basically what it comes down to is if I can roll a 1 with this, I'm going to probably be forcing the Germans to leave the hex. I do not roll that 1, so the Germans are going to probably keep the hex. Here, and then the final hex. And then for the Germans, they get to counterattack. Again, it's a skirmish, so there's not a lot of chance of casualties. The French have failed. They occupy the hex, but they don't control Paris. Now, if the Germans really were careful here, if they really wanted to be careful, they would say, I'm not going to do anything else that causes a battle. But Chateau Thierry here is available to me. That's a victory point I can grab. There's another victory point here in Rouen. Those are both worth taking as far as I'm concerned. And that's the problem. 1, 2. I'll pull something from back here that doesn't matter. And then my other one will be, can I get more? Can I get more without attacking? Well, I have 4 movement points if this goes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, flipped the wrong thing. And I grab through there, and that'll get me more of these. I'll pull these guys off. Through there. And now we're at the point where we count points, basically. And I'm pretty sure the Germans have just won. Let's see. We hit strategic movement. See, I don't want to do strategic movement. Nobody's got any points, so no problem there. Mandated battle, victory point reduction, German immediate victory. We've got that. So, plan 17 is long gone. I can get rid of those. I put the German markers in. First thing, we get 10 points for Paris. And then what we're going to be doing is just pulling victory point markers for each place where we got victory points. Oh, we want to put them like this so that they're secret. Okay, so that's 3. And I'll be continuing, you know, for each of the victory point spaces. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get more than 22, though. And in fact, we hit 34, which easily gets us a victory. Yes, I screwed a few rules up. I think the biggest one was the Schlieffen plan thing. But, you know, you can kind of look at that as a, well, what if the Germans allowed themselves that race to the sea a little earlier? Problem with that? The English... I kind of have an objection to the whole BEF goes it alone rule. Basically, not that it's unreasonable in some senses. So if you're following the Schlieffen plan, it does make sense. Because the Germans won't be going out there. And if you're not following the Schlieffen plan, the rule gets removed with the optional game that allows you to be more flexible. But the real issue here was maintaining contact with the French army. That you should have to be distributed in connection with a solid French line. The real problem would be if you allowed a gap. And that's where the victory point penalty should be. In fact, I feel like the Schlieffen plan rules may be a little unreasonable in the sense that, to some extent, this is the best German route for advance. Of course, the Allies don't have to worry about protecting it, and historically they did not. Why would that be? Well, historically it had to do with massing your armies for that one big push. Now, some people argue with Der Weltkrieg, up here, the Western Front, that somehow it organically forces that. I say bullshit on that. What it actually... this game would more organically focus it by the fact that you only have a certain amount of coming-ins that you can move. With that game, I gotta say, if you run and try to attack along that way with the Germans, you force the Allies up there. If you don't attack there, you don't force the Allies there, because it's just not that important. And that's perfectly reasonable. That's sort of the effect here. If you played without the Schlieffen plan, you know, you might want to follow it, you might not. There is a certain doctrinal basis to not running to the coast. There's no real impetus to prevent you from doing so. So, whatever. Anyway, I had fun playing this out, even with the mistakes. I think this is a really neat little system, and I'll talk more about it in the review. But I find it kind of a shame. A couple of things are a shame. One is the rulebook mess. It's not it's not the worst I've seen, but it causes a certain amount of suffering. But also the simple fact that this was a standalone game. I feel like while Ted Reyes here was looking for systems maybe to try to play out or whatever, and I guess he did Clash of Giants and played another and built another game off of that with Clash of Giants 2. But in a sense, this one to me deserves to be looked at as maybe the possible basis for other games in a system. I think it's a really, really cool design.